Hey everyone, welcome back to my sewing channel. The time has come to make the most intimidating part of historical costuming to me, and that is my pair of stays. Stays and corsets are pretty complex projects, and they require quite a bit of engineering and fitting to make them work the way that they're intended to work. You're looking for a specific historical silhouette, and the stays are a critical part of achieving that. So if you don't get it right, the rest of the look will be off, and everything has to be built on the measurements that you get from the stays and your underpinnings. So I've made the shift, I've made the false rump or the bum pad, and now it's time to make the stays from Simplicity 8162. This is the American Duchess pattern, and this is for 1750s to 1790s. And you know, everybody wants to go on to making the outfit that everybody sees. The stays are just underneath your clothes. No one will ever see them, but they're so important. You have to have it, and you have to have it fitted just right. So I have kind of an hourglass, large busted, short-waisted figure, and I knew it was going to require some alterations to get that fit just right. The whole process was just a little bit intimidating to me. So it's time to make my mock-up of the stays, and I want to go ahead and show that to you as a part one of two parts on making these stays and tell you a little bit about the lessons I've learned. I don't have very much footage because I was really concentrating a lot, but watch the process and then come back and I will tell you the 10 lessons that I learned while making this project. I'm back in the sewing room and it's time to tackle the stays. So I am looking at the back of the pattern envelope, and my measurements have me still at that size 20, but the more I'm looking at the pattern pieces and pinning them onto my dress form, I'm seeing that a size 16 with a bust adjustment is probably going to be better for me than a 20. I found that the 20 was way too much ease on the chemise, and I also, as a result, made the smaller bum pad. I am also petite from the waist up, and I'm gonna need a shorter shoulder strap anyway. But I don't know, see, the only place that these don't meet up at a size 16 is right here in the bust, which is no surprise. This dress form is just a little bit off from my measurements, but I'm extremely squishy. So I think I'm gonna mock up a size 16 and just put in some extra seam allowance and hope for the best. I've known for a long time that I wanted to make corsets, and obviously you need them as part of historical costuming. So when I did my big fabric sorting video, I hung on to everything that would be suitable for a corset. So that means that it doesn't stretch and it's heavy weight. So I've got some canvases here. I have some outdoor upholstery fabric that doesn't have stretch, or if it does, it's hardly any stretch. This I think I would like to have for the outside of the corset. I think that's really pretty, and it's a perfect fabric for a corset. It doesn't stretch at all. And so I'll probably do a mock-up out of the stripe here and then do the finished corset in this on the outside with another layer of something inside, and then line it in just white cotton. So that is the plan. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting out a mock-up, which just seems really scary to me. Here are all the pieces cut out, and this is just one layer. So for my mock-up, I have allowed an additional seam allowance on all the pieces, and I just marked the stitching line using tracing paper, and I'm not sure you can see that, maybe you can, but I'm going to go ahead and baste this together along the stitching line and just pull it on to see how close I am on the fit. I do understand that once I put in the boning, it's gonna shrink up just a little bit, but I can at least see if there's any major fit issues with the size 16 that I cut out. So my next step will be to stitch those together and give it a try. I made my first mock-up, and there are things that are good about it and things that are bad about it. One of the main issues is that I'm kind of between sizes. So I had cut out a size 16, and I think the 16 is right for the back of me, but the front of me needs to go up a size, and I still need to make some additional adjustments in addition to just changing the size. So if I hold this up, this slit is supposed to come right at your waistline. If I hold it here, it's going to come around in front and be just fine right here, but it's way too small in the bust. So this whole top part needs to change just a little bit. This is after I let out the seams just a little bit. So actually this is was cut as a size 16, but I left extra seam allowance on there. So it's really more like a size 18. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a size 18 in the front, and I'm going to raise the length of this whole top edge. I consulted with some people in a costuming group that I have recently joined, and what they told me was that this should come up mid-bust. There is a landmark on a lady's bosom. That is your target. I don't want to say the word on YouTube, but anyway, the top of the stays should come up to that landmark, and they're short on me. And it's interesting because I'm short-waisted, so I guess if I had a more typical bust size, like a size B or C, these would probably be fine, but because I am a larger bust size, it takes up too much of the length and they don't come up high enough. So I'm going to raise the top edge of the stays. When I made my 1920s dress, I found out that the measurement from here to here across my back is a small percentage of my overall bust measurement. So I think I figured out that I had 17 or 18 inches from here to here across the back. And then the rest of my bust measurement, which is right around a 42, is coming from the front. So if I increase the size all the way around, it's going to end up too big across the back. So I'm going to leave the back one where it fits and has a little bit of a gap for lacing, and then try to adjust the front. That's the long story. I'm going to do a second mock-up and we'll see where we get from there. Here are the pieces cut out for my second mock-up. So again, I have size 16 for the back and side back, and then I have a size 18 for the front and side front. And then here on the top of the front piece and the side front piece, I did give myself a little extra height to hopefully give me the coverage that I need and the support that I need here. And I do know once I make it with the boning and both layers, it's going to shrink up just a little bit. So I think it should be just right. So I'm going to hopefully have a finished mock-up after this. Adding length to the top worked, but a straight seam line was not working. And I consulted American Duchess, and they have a page, and I'll link it down below, where they talk about hacks for this pattern. And one of the things was for a full bust that you can create this kind of S-shaped curve to allow for more room at the bust while keeping the waist measurement the same. So I had added in extra seam allowance so I would be able to play around with this, and by golly, it worked well. So I'm going to recut these pieces with an appropriate seam allowance, and then I'm going to cut 2 layers and actually sew them together and bone them, just so I can check the fit once I can lace it up. Because right now I'm just holding these pieces up to my body to kind of see where it's going to fall. And I am squishy, so I think, you know, being able to adjust the lacing and things like that, this size should fit. But this is what solved the problem for the bust, I think. I made this mock-up last night and it wasn't quite fitting like I wanted it to. So I sent some pictures to a local costuming group and they gave me some feedback, which was kind of what I was thinking. Originally, I had my straps kind of coming up here and it just made the top sit funny. So I moved the straps over to the side, and I'm going to take out some of the length that I had previously added here. So once I do that, suddenly you have a much more historical look and fit. I can't believe the difference with such a small change. So if I fold this in and we've got the strap moved farther to the side, they fit much better. So I will insert some footage here. They are still a size too small. Apparently I'm very, very squishy. And when I laced everything up, the lacing in the back is almost completely closed, which you don't want, because if they stretch over time, you want to be able to adjust them. I finally got the fit here in the front just right. And so I think I'm going to just go down a size in the back, but I don't want to change where the side front and the front meet. I think I finally got that just where it needs to be, and I'm very happy with it, so I don't want to monkey with it too much. But yeah, they look great. This is over my shift that I made, or my chemise, and it's super comfortable, very supportive, not any pain anywhere. I can bend, well, I don't want to bend there. I can bend over at the waist. They hit me exactly where they should. So there they are. Here, I'll stand in front of the black. They still need to be finished, right? They have to be bound and all those bones tucked in and filed away. But here's what it looks like on the back. And you can see that this lace is nearly shut. So I don't want it to be that close. I will make sure I have a gap of at least 1.5 or 2 inches back there. So I've got quite a bit to take out, but man, what a difference. Just that little modification went from being, okay, well, they look all right, to finally they look like that 18th century silhouette. I'm tempted to add a little bit of length on these tabs as well, just to get that line a little bit longer. I am petite from the waist up, so they're kind of short. And I see a lot in pictures that they go down just a little bit so that there's an angle like down like this, right? That they would be down just this, maybe this much further. So I might tweak the proportion just a little bit, and it's an easy fix. If I make the tabs longer and I don't like them, I just cut them back again. That's an easy fix. So yeah, there's a working mock-up of these stays. And actually it didn't take that long to sew them up. I thought it would take a lot longer. Sewing all the bony channels is a great way to get rid of all the nasty thread that you have, little bits and bobs on the bobbin. So this is a pair of stays of many colors, because I probably have 8 different thread colors in here. But I'm just using up all those little nearly gone bobbins and nearly gone spools of thread. But how fun is this? I am so excited, you guys. This is one of the things that I've been so intimidated about with historical costuming, and I made it. I made it through the hardest thing in my head, which is making a pair of stays. That's the mock-up complete. I have already begun cutting out and sewing together my finished stays, so I'll have that video hopefully in the next week or 2. But in the meantime, let me talk about the 10 lessons that I learned through this fitting process. Know your body measurements. You really need to have good measurements on the bust, the waist, your hips, and even some around, like from armpit to armpit across your back. You kind of need to know how your body's made and where your measurements really are. If I went straight off my bust measurement and didn't take into account that I'm actually pretty narrow across the back, I'm going to end up with a mock-up that doesn't fit. So really know your body and your body measurements. Pattern envelopes are not the gospel truth. So the pattern says that there is negative ease in the stays, which means that the finished product will be smaller than your measurements. American Duchess also says this in her video. So she says, cut for your measurements. Well, I did that. I cut for the measurements on the envelope, and it was way too big. So according to the pattern, I should have cut a size 20, and what I ended up with was more like a size 14 and a little bit in the front, maybe closer to a 16. That's a huge difference. It's something you would not know if you didn't do a mock-up. And if you had cut into your fashion fabric and completed the stays only to find out that they are too big, that would be really sad. So definitely do a mock-up, but expect that your finished product will be different from the pattern measurements, and don't let that mess with your head. Don't be afraid to mix and match sizes. I am narrow across the back, so I ended up cutting a size 14 for the center back, and side front pieces. And then I have closer to a size 16 in the front, but I made a full bust adjustment between this piece and this side front piece. It's okay to mix and match those pattern pieces, and you can just make some adjustments on your mock-up or on the final cut to make sure that those pieces flow well together. It's a really easy fix. So use the pieces that work for your body, even if it's not all the same number. Use the right kind of fabric for your mock-up. When you make stays and corsets, you really need to have a stiff, non-stretch fabric. If it's stretchy, it will not hold the shape that you need for that historical silhouette. So when you make your mock-up, you need to also use something that is going to be pretty stiff and not stretchy. I used kind of a canvas, and it had a little more stretch than I really would have liked for the mock-up. So the more I tried it on, the more you can see, and I'll show a picture here, you can see those lines start to wiggle just a little bit as that's stretching out. My final pattern fabric is very stiff, doesn't have any stretch to it whatsoever, and that will make a difference in the fit. So I got close enough with my mock-up, so it's okay that they're going to be a little tighter, stiffer, and smaller in the finished product, because I needed that anyway. But don't make a mock-up in regular cotton, quilting, muslin, whatever kind of fabric. It will not work. Don't do that. And definitely use a stiffer, heavier weight fabric that is closer to what you're going to use for the final product. You'll be much happier with the fit. Leave extra seam allowances. This is especially true if you are full busted like I am. I left an extra inch on all of my initial seams just so I could get this fit correct. Straight out of the package, it's a straight seam here in the front right here, and I have a large bust and a small under bust, so I knew that that straight seam was not going to be enough. It would end up squishing me in and cutting me off here. So I left an extra inch, and I was able to make a full bust adjustment according to American Duchess. And I'm going to link a picture from her blog here, but I also put all these references in the description box below. She says to make a sort of an S-shaped curve. And I did not have good fit with a straight seam, but as soon as I sewed in that S-shaped curve, solved the problem immediately. So if I had not had big seam allowances, I wouldn't have been able to make that adjustment. I would have had to cut out and sew new pieces. So definitely leave yourself some extra space on your first mock-up until you can kind of zero in on what you're going to need in terms of fit. If you have a full bust, you definitely want to go for the extra boning. These are half bone stays, and American Duchess has a tutorial on how to make them fully boned. If you have a full bust, definitely do fully boned stays. You will not have enough support otherwise. On your mock-up, you have to make it boned. You can't just sew the pieces together and say, yeah, that'll fit. The boning makes a difference in how it fits and whether it fits. So when I made my first mock-up, I used the half boned pattern that they had straight out of the envelope, and it was nowhere near fitting me. It was just awful. As soon as I added extra bones, the fit changed dramatically, and I was able to move forward with a much better idea of what I needed from those stays. So definitely check out the alternate boning patterns that American Duchess has, because it really does help to get a better fit, especially for a full bust. I have plenty of support now, and I am a 34H, so you know, normally it takes a lot to get enough support in the bust. These are fantastic, but they're fully boned. I didn't get that with the half boned pattern right out of the envelope. If you have a full bust, you may need stronger materials. The 1/4 inch cable ties that they recommend as an alternate to, say, the more expensive artificial whalebone, they're not necessarily strong enough. So when I made my first mock-up, which was half boned, those things bent and twisted all over the place. There was no support whatsoever. It got better when I added more bones, but I still had trouble with the lacing channels buckling, especially here in the front and down around the curves of my belly. So I ended up on the final using 1/2 inch Ridgeline boning, which is just the polyester boning. It comes on a roll. It's pretty inexpensive. 1/2 inch, it's stiffer, and I put those in the front lacing channels. And I think that's going to make a big difference in how the tabs lay and how the whole lacing goes in the front and the back. So you may need to use some stronger stuff, especially if you're full busted. So keep that in mind. Proportion is everything. As you're making your mock-up, you really need to pay attention and look at lots and lots of pictures of actual 18th century corsets. Take a look at the proportions of them, because that's what's giving you that historical silhouette. You may have to cut the tabs higher to meet your waist, and it might be at a different spot than on the pattern. You may need to cut down the top a little lower or raise it up a little higher to meet that mid-bust height that is part of that proportion. These straps need to be in the correct place. I ended up adjusting my strap placement and it made a huge difference. I did all of these things on my mock-up. If I hadn't made a mock-up and made those adjustments, I would have just sewn the pattern as it is and then been very dissatisfied either with the pattern itself or with my body. But your body is your body, and you need to take into account how it's built. So definitely make those adjustments that you need. It's part of the process. So this is my first time ever doing this, and I cannot believe the difference after I made just those minor adjustments. It's a 1/2 inch here, it's a 1/4 of an inch there. It's just these little tiny changes that make all the difference in the proportion of the stays and how they look and how they create that fashionable silhouette. You do not want your stays to lace all the way closed. You don't. Stays are super forgiving, so if there's a gap in front and they stretch out a little bit, you can lace them a little bit tighter. If they close all the way right from the beginning, then they stretch, you're out of luck because they'll be too big. That's part of the reason why, even though my mock-up fit me like perfectly, you know, it closed in the back and nearly closed in the front, that's not the right size. I need to have at least a couple of inches of play in that back lacing area to give myself a little bit of room to adjust them down the road. I don't want to go through all the trouble of making this project and then lose 20 pounds and suddenly they don't fit me anymore. So I would much rather have the ability to lace down, to lace them wider, to adjust it at the bust or at the waist as needed. And that's what the ladies would have done. They wouldn't have made a new pair of stays every time their body change, they would have had just a little bit of adjustment through those lacing areas to be able to expand and contract as their body changed. Definitely pay attention to that on your mock-up. If it laces all the way closed, that's not what you want. Keep at it until it's right. Yes, it's a lot of work to make a mock-up that is fully boned. You're sewing all those channels, you're doing all that work on something that you're going to end up, ripping apart and throwing away later. But it is absolutely worth it. And a lot of the work that you do does go on into the finished product. So when you're making your bones for your mock-up, those bones can be reused in your final project. So some of that work does not go to waste. But it is a lot to think, oh, I've got to sew all these boning channels and I know I've got to sew them all again. It doesn't take that much time, and it's worth it in the end because you're going to be much happier with your project. So just keep at it until the fit of those stays is perfect. I think I ended up cutting 3 different mock-ups before I got to a size and a fit that was perfect for me. And so now that I'm working on the finished stays, I'm just really, really satisfied with how they look. I know what I'm doing. They're coming together beautifully. I knew right where to put in those boning channels. It's going quickly. I'm really happy, and I think I'm going to be super happy with the end result. Anyway, those are 10 lessons I learned. I hope that they'll help you as you embark on your first time ever making 18th century stays, or if you made some and you were unhappy with them, maybe this will inspire you to make them again and make those adjustments that you need to be really satisfied with it. Thanks for watching. Take care. I hope to see you next time. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and follow me on Instagram so you can stay up to date on this channel.